This is a Tier 1 intervention project designed for a social studies classroom for Dr. K. Brocato's Planning for Diversity of Learners course at MSU, with your hosts,
Molly Beth Ott
and Maggie Clover.
Tier 1 intervention contains 5 components. These 5 components include creating a physical setting that supports academic and social goals, establishing and maintaining expectations for behavior, also known as rules and procedures, enhancing students' motivation, curriculum design, and working with families and/or community members.
Today, we are going to be focusing on the third component, establishing and maintaining expectations for behavior. We want you to listen up and pay attention because our presentation will help you to establish rules and procedures in your future classrooms. In Carol Weinstein's book, Secondary Classroom Management, she discusses multiple guidelines and tactics for establishing and maintaining classroom rules and procedures in the classroom. This is specifically covered in Weinstein's chapter, Establishing Norms for Behavior. Weinstein states, while students have general notions about appropriate school behavior, they don't know your specific expectations.
Not knowing the norms for appropriate behavior causes insecurity and misunderstanding among students.
Clearly defined classroom rules and procedures helps create an environment that is predictable and comprehensible.
Now, what exactly are rules and procedures? Harry Wong states that a rule helps prevent or encourage behavior by stating student expectations. While one set of rules won't apply to all classrooms, writing specific rules to fit you and your students' needs can be simple with these guidelines. Effective classroom rules for general conduct. 1. Reasonable and necessary.
2. Clear and understandable.
3. Consistent with instructional goals and with what we know about how people learn.
4. Consistent with school policies.
Now that we have discussed rules, let's move on to procedures. Rules and procedures work hand in hand to make a classroom a safe and efficient environment. What exactly is a procedure? Harry Wong states it's simply a method or a process for how things are to be done.
Effective procedures can be divided into 3 main categories: class running routines, non-academic routines that enable the classroom to run smoothly. An example is taking attendance or sharpening pencils. Lesson running routines, routines that directly supports instruction by specifying the behaviors that are necessary for teaching and learning to take place. An example is collecting homework or distributing materials. And lastly, interaction routines, routines that specify when talk is permitted and how it occurs. Stating when to talk among students is permitted, such as during the bell ringer and during transitions, is an example.
Now that you know how to establish rules and procedures, here are some examples.
Topakino, là-bas. Oh, voilà. Ok, là-bas. Banana!
Here are a few more examples of rules that can be used in the classroom. When writing your future classroom rules, remember 5 is the ideal amount to have.
Now we are going to introduce you to a few examples of effective classroom procedures.
Students will raise their hands when they speak in my class. It is the view of the ministry that a theoretical knowledge will be sufficient to get you through your examinations, which, after all, is what school is all about.
And how's theory supposed to prepare us for what's out there?
There is nothing out there, dear.
In addition to students raising their hands, other effective procedures include encouraging students to ask the people on their left or right for help. If they cannot help you, please raise your hand. Or pick up your work at the printer and put it in the labeled tray at the back of your room.
Now, how do we maintain these rules and procedures? 1. Make sure to have logical consequences. Consequences should always be related to the offense, be reasonable and respectful. Consequences should never humiliate, and they teach children responsibility and the relationship between actions and consequences. You can also use a consequence ladder, which is step-by-step consequences. It allows students to see the progression of consequences. Also, consequences build on each other when a student continuously breaks the rules.
To maintain rules and procedures, you can also incorporate incentives and penalties. Let's take a look at Skinner's operant conditioning theory. It uses both positive and negative reinforcements to encourage good and wanted behavior while deterring bad and unwanted behavior. Incentives strengthen or encourage unwanted behavior by the addition of positive reinforcement. Penalties deter bad and unwanted behavior through the use of negative reinforcement. The use of penalties in a discipline policy needs to be fair and respectful and constantly enforced. The use of incentives should be used sparingly throughout the academic year so that students do not become dependent on the need for reward, but build their own sense of responsibility.
Now, let's take a look at a classroom without effective classroom rules and procedures.
Everything is under control. No. Monsters! What are you doing with this? Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! No, don't start this. Oh, no.
Now that is definitely a classroom management policy I do not want to be a part of. Now, just remember, while discipline policies are needed, the use of incentives or fear of consequences should not be used to motivate students. The use of effective rules and procedures should promote students' self-regulation and responsibility.
So how do we plan to relate rules and procedures to our social studies classroom? Well, the purpose of social studies is to help young people make informed and reasoned decisions for the public good as citizens of a culturally diverse, democratic society and an independent world. Rules and procedures are an important factor of our democratic society, so by establishing them in the classroom, we are teaching our students how to be democratic citizens. Rules and procedures also foster self-regulation based on the student's own motivation. Self-regulation allows students to understand how to actively participate in a society.
Adjusting and modifying rules for students' particular needs is also a component we plan to incorporate in our future classrooms. Listen up while I explain to you a real-life example of behavioral modification for a student with a varying cultural need than others. Hey everyone, I'm just hanging out in my fish tank. Today I'm going to talk to y'all about behavioral modifications. I experienced a real-life example in my studio school. I have a student, we call him Bob, and he recently, on my first day, the teacher informed me that he had been taking off his ADD medicine. And with this, so his behaviors had changed, especially over the 2-week period that I've been going. So the teachers have implemented different rules and procedures for his needs specifically. For instance, when I go in for tutoring and he's there, I do one-on-one help rather than group. He does, the teachers have him in an individual environment, They also give him a little bit longer amount of time on tests. They help him stay organized with more procedures throughout his day. For rules-wise, they're a little bit more lenient on at the beginning on his speaking out of turn and any kind of not be able to stay in his seat kind of rule. But over the 2 weeks, they have established those back with him to really get him back in the routine. So overall, the behavioral modifications used in my school experience have really helped adjust Bob, the student, and his needs especially. So behavioral modification is something that we definitely all need to incorporate in our future classrooms as we get to know our students. An MTAS standard that applies to using culturally appropriate management strategies and behavioral modifications is standard number 2, which states, the teacher uses understanding of individual differences in diverse cultures and communities to ensure inclusive leading environments that enable each learner to meet high standards. Both the studio school teacher and Maggie and I plan to use this in our future classrooms. So just remember, when establishing and maintaining rules and procedures, there are as many diversities as there are students in the classroom.
Richard Curran and Alan Mindler stated, effective discipline comes from the heart and soul of the teacher. It comes from the belief that teaching students to take responsibility for their behaviors is as much the job of the teacher as teaching history or math, and is more important than simply enforcing rules.
Overall, Weinstein reiterates 2 important functions of rules and procedures in the classroom. 1, to provide structure and predictability that helps students feel more comfortable. 2, reduces the complexity of classroom life, allowing you and your students to concentrate on teaching and learning.
We hope we have helped you understand how to establish and maintain rules and procedures in your future classrooms, so you can have an effective and safe learning environment for your students.
Thank you for watching. The end.
Julio, get the stretch.